Hey, what's up guys? This is Antonino and you're watching Earth to Aurak. Check this out. Hi all and welcome to our new YouTube channel. As you can tell by the title of our channel, we are called Earth to Aurak. Now who are we exactly? We're just a bunch of curious and passionate students who are looking to broaden our knowledge on the topic of philosophy. And through this endeavor of ours, we not only created this YouTube channel, but we too created a blog which we'll be linking down below. And through these outlets, we'll be delivering some really interesting information on the topic of philosophy that will hopefully not only be helpful to you guys, but meaningful and applicable to your daily lives. So let's just get on with today's video, shall we? Today we are going to be talking about perils of the mind. It's a pretty interesting topic because it has both philosophical branches as well as psychological branches. Now, before we delve deeper into the details of this topic, let's just set an agenda for today's video. So today we're going to be looking at the exact definition of perils of the mind, as well as how it occurs in daily life. Following that, we'll be looking at how it occurs in group settings, as well as collective judgment. And finally, we're going to be exploring how we can evade and prevent perils of the mind in general. Sounds like a pretty loaded video. Let's get on with it. So what exactly are perils of the mind? I mean, the term itself sounds pretty intimidating, right? Like, perils of the mind. Ooh, what exactly does it mean? In terms of philosophy, it's actually pretty simple. A peril of the mind is simply a trick that is played on the mind by the mind itself. I sound crazy saying this, but stick with me, guys. Perils of the mind can be pretty dangerous because they inhibit our rationality as well as our ability to think critically, and that in turn can lead to some pretty disastrous situations. But why does such a phenomenon occur, right? Like, the mind is pretty amazing when you think about it. The fact that a lot of the progressions in modern society can be attributed to a single thought in one's mind, that itself is pretty amazing. But if you think about it, the mind itself is far from perfect. It is actually pretty flawed. This is because certain beliefs, as well as cognitive biases, and even environmental influences can sway the decisions that we make for the worse. Let's look at some real-life examples where perils of the mind might exist. One example would be confirmation bias. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, confirmation bias is a type of cognitive bias, and it basically suggests that we humans like to interpret information in a way that is parallel to our own pre-existing beliefs. So in other words, we basically fish and seek for information that tries to prove what we believe. An example of confirmation bias would be in business. Investors fall victim to confirmation bias perhaps when they're investing in new startups. Let's say there's a startup that is looking for funding. If an investor initially likes the startup, he or she may disregard realities such as the fact that the CEO may lack experience, or the startup is not currently making any profits or revenue. On the flip side, however, if the investor possesses a negative perception towards the startup, when analyzing his decision, he will automatically, or she will automatically, look for the weaknesses of that startup just to confirm his negative beliefs of that. Now, either of these scenarios can lead to bad situations in terms of a loss of money or even a loss of opportunity. Another example would be the sunk cost fallacy. Now, this fallacy suggests that things are harder to abandon when we've invested more time, more money, and more effort into something. And it's basically called a fallacy because the response that is formed by the individual when influenced by this is based upon faulty and illogical reasoning. An example of the sunk cost fallacy would be Say there's a PhD student who is in their third year of studies, and they've invested some immense time, money, as well as effort into attaining their degree. But at this point, they're kind of facing this priority shift in their life, and they no longer see the value in continuing their degree. But because of all of this investment in time and money, as well as the expectations they've set for themselves and the expectations people have of them, they continue with this degree even though it may not benefit them in the grand scheme of things. Furthermore, it might not be obvious, but a potential peril of the mind could be the emotions and the feelings that we feel on a day-to-day basis. Now, emotions and feelings are part of human nature. I mean, they're extremely normal. They're what make you human. And you know, it's normal to experience these and even act upon them. But when these emotions are untrained and overwhelming as to hijack the way that you make your decisions in life, that can lead to some pretty disastrous and problematic situations that are a result of irrational thinking. An example where this peril of the mind is in full force would be, for example, in shopping. Right? When you're prone to impulse purchases, that is indicative of the fact that emotions are toying with you. Like if you're at a supermarket and you're hungry, of course you're going to be more prone to buying more food because that urgency is more apparent in your mind. Another more tragic example is faced by individuals who are severely depressed and anxious. These people may turn to methods such as self-harm to express their feelings. We also have something that is called the recency effect. Now, this theory and notion has a lot of psychological research that consolidates it, and it basically suggests that the order in which information is presented to us as humans really affects our judgment on certain decisions that we make. And elaborating further on what the theory suggests, it says that information that is presented to us more recently, we associate that information with more psychological weight than, say, information we've heard a long time ago on the same topic. Let's say that a group of people have been handpicked to go on the first ever commercial flight to the moon. I mean, that's a big deal, theoretically, right? And at first, they were told that there is a 50% chance that the aircraft, that is their mode of transport, will malfunction en route to the moon, which is obviously a pretty negative thing. But more recently, they were also told about the importance of such an endeavor and how it will serve such significance in terms of the relationship with humanity and space. And going off of what the recency effect says, the people who have been invited on this journey are gonna most likely make their decisions based on the information they've heard recently, which might not be the best thing. Finally, there's also change blindness. We encounter change on a daily basis in innumerable forms. In fact, there's a saying, the only thing constant is change, right? Now, it's been scientifically proven that humans are pretty bad at detecting or observing change in their environment. Huge volumes of information just pass us by every single day simply because we don't have the capacity to be aware or to retain knowledge or information from several things in a single given time. Let's say there's an air traffic coordinator, for example. And as you know, air traffic coordinators have to be really accustomed to their environment and know every single thing that is happening. if they miss the slightest change in their environment, that could lead to some pretty disastrous circumstances. In fact, it's really a big danger. Now that we've talked about how illogical and irrational decisions can be made on an individual basis, let's translate this into a group setting. Now you might be thinking, how exactly can a group arrive at a bad decision? I mean, in groups there are different people who bring different opinions and points of views that challenge each other to come to an outcome that is good, right? But there is one phenomenon called groupthink that actually suggests the opposite. This theory suggests that the decisions that groups arrive at can potentially be worse than the decisions made by individuals themselves due to the presence of certain factors. Now, what exactly are these factors that induce groupthink? First of all, there are steep hierarchies. With steep hierarchies, opinions will only be valued not because they're legitimate, but because they're coming from a person of higher authority. Another one would be stereotyping and exclusion, rather. What this means is that people in the group may stereotype or may perceive other people as inferior, and therefore they disregard those people's opinions and the people that are similar to them. This in turn leads to the insulation of the group and the more intolerant mentality as a whole. As well as this, there are also time constraints. Now, making decisions are pretty burdensome. They're pretty hard on their own, but when you add the element of time and when you need to make that decision by, that just makes the decision a lot more harder to make. And of course, you might make mistakes when making the decision. As well as this, there is also the desire to conform. Now, this is not to be confused with the idea of making a compromise with your group, because when you make a compromise, you try to find an appropriate balance that reflects all of your opinions, right? But when you try to strive for conformity, that almost means that you might even censor your own opinions just to make the decision without hassle. And finally, there is also homogeneity. Homogeneity basically means every single person in the group is the same. Now, that can't be good, because if every single person in the group is the same, all of their opinions will also be similar, and therefore no one's putting forward an idea that challenges anything to make the outcome better. Now that you know about groupthink, you might be asking yourself, is there still hope? What's the point of working in groups now if we're destined to fail, right? But that's simply not the case. Not all groups are condemned to fall into the trap that is groupthink. In fact, to ensure that you don't fall into that trap next time if you're working in a group, being aware of the factors that have been stated previously that cause groupthink is gonna be what saves your group and what leads you to a positive scenario. What I like to say is pre-warned, meaning being knowledgeable of what causes groupthink is pre-armed, right? Perhaps finding ways to combat each factor that causes groupthink would be an effective way to prevent groupthink as a whole. For example, if we look back at the factors that cause groupthink, you could say that the one theme that unites all of them is the lack of individuality and the lack of diversity in opinion. So perhaps by prioritizing individuality in your groups next time, by intentionally implementing a diverse set of people in your group, maybe, just maybe, something amazing might happen. Seeing as we've discussed all of these flaws that are faced by individuals and groups alike, you might be wondering, wouldn't the world just be a better place if we were all perfect, if we were all immune to flaws? Well, flaws are a part of human nature. the progressions that have taken place in modern society that have catapulted us into this era of growth and endless opportunity are a result of our ability to grow and learn from our mistakes and our flaws. And if you think about it, if we were completely immune to making mistakes, we would never be able to strive for something better, right? There's this really lovely quote that encapsulates what I'm trying to say, and it is, mistakes are the portals to discovery. As well as this, a lot of the perils that have been stated today are what make us individuals, are what set us apart from each human being on this planet. For example, our cognitive biases as well as our emotions. And if those lacked within us, there would be no individuality. And with no individuality, not only would the world be a boring place, but perhaps things like innovation would cease to exist. I'm leaving you with some food for thought there. So I guess that marks the end of today's session. Hopefully you've been able to take away something important from what's been said today. If you've enjoyed today's video, please show us some love by subscribing. If you have any questions, please leave them down below and we'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you again. I'm Antonino. This has been Earth to Aurak, and stay curious. Bye-bye.